In the interest of starting things in order, I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's now 5:33. So this is the regular select board meeting for December 30th, 2020. And Karen, do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
I'd like to make one adjustment, Josh.
Okay.
Down under other business, social agency status update. Can we move that to select board items and make it A and shift everything else down?
Sure.
What are you looking at? I didn't see what you're referring to.
In other business, item number 8, social agency status update, we're going to move it up to the top of the list in select board items just to have that
I'm
discussion.
not seeing that in the agenda I have, so,
Under other business?
right? All I have under business is A, annual appeals.
Oh, huh.
No,
Okay.
so there was,
Is there
I
an
had
updated?
Updated package.
yeah.
Did you send it out to people or is it on the website?
No, I sent it to the select board.
Okay.
It went out. It just went out today, I think, Karen.
It would have been yesterday.
Was it yesterday? Okay.
Okay, I will look for it.
The current
Okay.
one is also on the website if you want to look there.
It is on the website as well.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to approve minutes of December 16th. Vera, I saw somewhere, and I didn't catch up with this, but I think you had some suggestions for a couple corrections on the minutes. Is that correct, or was that from a previous set of minutes?
That's correct, and Alyssa made the corrections. So
Okay.
I'm not sure how you want to agree, like approve with corrections or what?
Yes. So unless they were anything substantive, which we need to know about, if they were just sort of detailed, then you could mention them. So let's get a motion on the table to approve the minutes, and then we can discuss it.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from December 16th, 2020.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of December 16th. So Bara, if you'd like to comment on changes you suggested.
There was just, hold on, I guess I have to, Alyssa, do you have that in front of you? I will have to find it.
Yeah, I can read what it is. So on item 6, select board items, the highway department preliminary budget discussion. We just changed the second sentence to say the select board discussed starting a reserve fund for equipment. I had written that you had chosen to do so, but that was wrong.
Oh, okay.
And on other business, Emily Payton and face masks. She did not talk about face masks. She talked about ending the state of emergency.
Okay. I have those listed on the current set of notes of minutes I have. So David, you have any further on questions on that?
No, not at all. Nope.
So it's been moved and seconded, and the corrections have been noted and made to the minutes we have in front of us. All those in favor of approving those minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so next, warrants to treasurer. We have two. We have a payroll and an AP. David, you want to make a motion for those?
Motion to approve and execute the warrants to the treasurer upon completion of review.
I second the motion.
Been moved and seconded to approve and execute the warrants as presented upon completion of review. If there's no further discussion.
I had a couple of questions.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll review.
Oh, okay.
So all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So Karen, you want to just run through them, and then Bara, if you have questions, so it'd be great.
Certainly.
Okay.
Payroll warrant dated December 31st, 2020, in the amount of $21,288.93.
it looked like there were a bunch of new people, or people I'd never seen before.
They could be fire department people that maybe didn't get paid last time.
Okay, so is it just they're on call or they're not always on there?
That's correct, Vera.
Okay.
So, and Alyssa told me that Eric McGowan, the $2,041 was for a training or finishing a certification or?
Yes, yep,
Okay, all right.
And that's for the fire department or for something else?
fire department.
Okay.
That would be reimbursement presumably for a course taken. Is that right, Karen? Probably.
Yeah, it appeared to be 2 courses that he had taken, so.
Okay. And then there's one, Julia Van Ronson. Is that Ranson? Is that library?
That is library. That's our second full-time librarian. Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on the payroll? Okay. So on the accounts payable,
So accounts payable dated December 19th through December 31st, 2020 in the amount of $54,923.26.
Who is Everett Prescott?
They are they're over in Chesterfield, and we get a lot of our water and sewer parts from them. But they also, we have our water meter, our handheld that reads the meters, and this is the contract, their annual contract.
that's EJP. It's that pipe supply place on the right-hand side on the way to Keene, David.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Awesome. Thank you.
And the People's United Bank line?
That is a loan payment. It's for
Okay.
one of the pickup trucks.
Okay, thanks.
For
You're
one of the highway pickups, the fire department? What?
I think it's the highway one.
No, it's the fire.
Is it the fire?
Yeah, it's a 19 Chevy.
Right. That's right, because Brian has the Ram and the old Chevy.
And RHR Smith is the auditors. Is that correct, Karen?
That is correct. So that's a partial payment.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, what is Swish White River Limited?
That is our supplier.
Like office supply type thing?
Yeah, like paper towels and garbage bags. We can get bulk ordering from them at a better price than Staples sometimes. So sometimes like our cleaners.
Like WB Mason kind of thing? That kind
Yeah.
of? Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
All right. Sounds good. Any other questions on those? You're all set, Barra?
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so we will move on next to public comment on items not on the agenda. So for people who are on screen, I can't see everybody on screen because my computer doesn't allow me to do that all at once. So if there's anybody on screen who wants to make a comment, please just make yourself known. Otherwise, enter something in the chat.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
with reference to our public discussion during the December 2nd and 16, 2020 Town of Putney Select Board meetings regarding the Town of Putney's fiscal health, the Astley Babbitt Fleming Stern scoring of the Town of Putney's fiscal health per the Ethan Allen Institute's Towns in Trouble, assessing municipal fiscal health in Vermont, and our audited financial statements was incorrectly called the Towns scoring. In governance of Vermont towns like Putney, the town is self-governing voters deciding via direct democracy at our town meetings whether to tax and how to spend our money. The Towns in Trouble scoring of Vermont towns' fiscal health actually is unacknowledged application of standard financial analysis, routinely guiding prudent investors, but not to a single scoring of an investment because the real world is not that simple. Our select board and town manager finance director deciding not to invest in a new fire engine because you did not feel comfortable also was too simple for the real world. Thanks to Selectman Babbitt's suggestion, Town of Putney select persons, town manager, finance director, and voters now are learning how to guide ourselves financially to invest in our town. I have begun to design and create a Town of Putney fiscal health dashboard, beginning with public reporting of the past fiscal year surpluses of the general and highway funds, public reporting of the current percentage of each property tax installment already paid. During the December 16th, 2020 Town of Putney Select Board meeting, select persons and town manager finance director discussed both the COVID-19 pandemic's financial effects on Town of Putney taxpayers and retaining and increasing Town of Putney budgetary surpluses, taxpayers' money taxed and collected but not spent that taxpayers would have spent otherwise. The Town of Putney is keeping taxpayers' fiscal year 2019-2020 $325,000 surplus in case it needs it someday. Businesses and professional practices must credit excess payments to customers' accounts, as you should do if you wish to provide COVID-19 pandemic financial relief to taxpayers. Otherwise, you have to freeze or cut their property taxes. Given mandatory increases of expenses such as employees' health insurance, you have to cut other line items across the board. Tax installments. First, 98% paid. Second, 96% paid. Third, 25% paid already. Thank you.
Thank you. It sounded, Mr. Fairman, like you were perhaps reading that. Is that correct?
As usual.
I don't believe that I have a copy of that. If you could forward that to Karen so she could get it to us, that would be great. Just it was a lot of information to digest all at once, and I'd love to see a copy of it. So if that's possible, that would be helpful. Also, obviously, it's a public record. A printed record would be nice if you have it available for us.
Of course, Mr. Chairman. As usual, I shall be forwarding a copy to Ms. Harlow for the files, and I also shall be posting this on iPutney, but I always follow standard business practice of not blindsiding people, so I presented it here first, which also honors the Vermont open meeting law.
Good, thank you. Yeah, the question, and I'm not sure what the implication was, but the question about using I mean, we're getting into budget discussion, obviously, but using surpluses and returning money to quote unquote customers, or in our case, taxpayers, you know, that's a discussion that's ongoing right now. And I think that we're, anyway, when we get into the budget, we'll talk about that a little bit more. But, you know, it's up to us as a select board to decide what we do with those surplus funds. You know, returning them is always a possibility. The other thing to do is to have it offset upcoming general fund expenses, and thereby reducing the tax burden ahead of us. So that's all sort of in limbo still, but we're getting there as we work through the budgets. But thank you for that information. Okay, I don't see anybody else looking to make public comment on items not on the agenda. So I'm going to move on to select board items for discussion and action. And as per Karen's request, we're going to look at social agency status update first. Karen, you want to go ahead and go through that?
So I have asked the top tier of the social agencies, which are Putney agencies, to speak to the board. And I had 3 questions for each organization. Of course, I don't have them in front of me. So Kate and Nancy, you're going to have to help me out here. And Maggie's here as well. So
Yeah, I have
it is the Putney Food Shelf, the Putney Community Center, and then Putney Community Cares, which is also Putney Family Services. They have merged as one organization. And we have representation from these 3 agencies. So I guess we can start with Nancy?
Thank you for giving the organizations the time to do this. So I'm here right now representing the Putney Food Shelf. For the question, have you seen an increase or decrease in the assistance you are providing in the past year? Yes, we have seen an increase. The Putney Food Shelf is serving twice the number of people that we were serving last year. This kind of gets into the second question: how has COVID-19 impacted your organization? In multiple ways. We now, because of COVID, have stopped in-person shopping. We have a drive-up service now, and in that on Saturday mornings from 9 to 11 a.m. And we are serving anywhere from 55 to 65 or 75 people on a household on a Saturday morning. Then we also have instituted a home delivery service in the Putney area, and we are currently delivering to 34 households. So we're hovering around 100, which is twice what we were doing last year. Also, COVID has impacted how we have food delivered. Sevka has been volunteering to help us pick up food at the food bank in Brattleboro and delivering it. We have a core, like a pod of volunteers who have who monitor their health so that they can work together. The COVID has reduced our number of volunteers. Many of our volunteers are retired people, and so they are in the demographic that's at risk. So they've pulled back. And we have basically taken over the space in the community center. And the third question is, how can the community assist in supporting your organization? This is a very unusual year. As I said, our volunteers have had to pull back. We've had to develop a COVID team that prescribes our protocols in line with the Vermont Health Department. We've had fewer drives. We weren't able to have the mail carriers drive this year, and the top of the truck was virtual instead of in person. And because our numbers have increased, our costs have increased. We've also been trying to provide healthy as possible supplemental food, which is our mission, healthy supplemental food. So we are buying eggs, we are buying milk. Some of the food that we get from the food bank is free, but some of it we have to pay for. People have been, so in terms of how the community can assist us, people have been amazingly generous in this unusual year. We have had tremendous support. Since people can't volunteer, they've come through monetarily, and we are very grateful for those donations. I don't know if you have any questions relevant to the food shelf, because I also am here to represent the community center, so I will do that in a minute. Any questions about the food shelf?
Alan, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if donations are keeping up with expenses. You're not going broke at this point?
No, people have been generous, and we're staying well above water, so we're in good shape at the moment. Yes, it's been wonderful, really amazing.
So I have a question are you preferring that people donate money rather than food?
Yes, at this time, because of COVID, we have restricted our donations from our private donations of food from people. Great. So monetary donations are much more helpful right now.
Okay.
And given that it's the 30th of December, and for many many people making contributions before the first of the year is helpful for them for their taxes. My recollection, Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong, is that if a check sent to you is postmarked before the first, then that validates it for a contribution in this year. Is that correct? Do you know?
If the date on the check is by the 31st of December 2020, it counts in 2020. The postmark doesn't have anything to do with it. If the check itself is dated the 31st.
Okay, so people who are looking to contribute could still take advantage of tax advantages this year by contributing tomorrow. So
yes, they could.
just for those who are wondering. So
thank you very much in advance.
You might cover this in the next conversation or the next topic you're talking about. I'm wondering, can you speak a little bit to the I guess basically the financial relationship between the food shelf and the community center?
Sure. The community center is an autonomous organization. It remains an autonomous organization. It just so happens that the same people serve on each board, but both organizations are independent. This appointment of new board members happened on September 18th, 2020. The food shelf pays $3,600 a year rent to the community center for the space that we use. Although we've moved into the big room and we are not paying extra for that.
And by virtue of this year is such an anomaly that it may sort of be a moot point, but by virtue of you using that bigger space, does that limit the community center's capability to produce income for themselves?
Yes. When the governor declared the state of emergency on March 13th, 2020, the community center was immediately no longer available for public rental. Wildflower Play School, which rents the play school space, they suspended operation, although they are still paying their rent. Zumba classes were immediately canceled, and dog training classes were immediately canceled. And those were the Wildflower Play School, Zumba, and dog training were the three steady sources of income for the community center. And the food shelf as well, but the food shelf is continuing to operate. The other three organizations have suspended operations. Zumba is online, I think, right now. And the dog trainer found another space.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any further questions about the food shelf? All right. Nancy, I think you need to change hats and talk about the community center then.
Okay, changing hats. The new board took over on September 18th. The building itself is in good shape. The one thing we did have work done on was the roof this year. We had Geyer and Son look at the slate. They said it was in pretty good condition. They did about $2,000 worth of work on it just to make sure it stayed in good shape. But that was the only work that needed to be done. As I said, of the four entities that rent space, 3 of them are no longer operating there.
So that answers one of the questions, which was how has COVID-19 affected the community center? Is that right?
Yes. Let me go back to the community center purpose is to promote, quote, to promote the well-being of Putney and its surrounding communities through cultural, educational, recreational, and human services and to foster cooperation and understanding between all individuals, groups, and organizations within the town of Putney. So under the human services component, the food shelf is using the community center space, pretty much all of it on the first floor, for storage of food and to stage the delivery procedures that we have now. So what happens on a Saturday morning is that runners go to the cars, take the order, come inside, compile the order. Every shopper gets a bag of shelf-stable foods, a bag of dairy and meat, and a bag of produce, and some incidental items depending on what the food bank had available that week. And then those are taken out to the cars. All of the people who are volunteering, it takes about 9 people on a Saturday morning now, and all 9 people are wearing masks and observing physical distancing. So the community center space is really being used for that human services component. The other aspect of that that I forgot about and didn't include in my town report is that everyone eats. When Putney Mutual Aid brought Everyone Eats to Putney, they started using the community center as the staging area for delivery. And I asked Ruby McAdoo how that was going, thinking that you might want the numbers tonight. So she sent me this information. She said, beginning in August 2020, Putney Mutual Aid brought Everyone Eats to Putney through the community center. And as of mid-December, they had served 3,563 meals, an additional 400 to Putney Central School and the Grammar School, and an additional 200 for Thanksgiving. So the community center is the distribution point in Putney for Everyone Eats.
And what are the 3 questions again that Karen wanted to focus on?
An increase or a decrease in the assistance you were providing. I would say that the community center has seen an increase. It's just different now. COVID has impacted the organization by reducing the number of organizations that can rent the space. Mm-hmm. And how can the community assist? Again, it's really right now the community center has approximately $12,000 in the bank account for operations. Expenses are waste, garbage pickup, snow plowing and maintenance like that. The computer system, the Wi-Fi, and I think that's it. So the costs per month are, plus the USDA loan payment, so the costs per month are about $500.
Thank you.
So Nancy, I have a question. So your utilities, like electricity and heat, is that through Putney Community Center?
Well, for the food shelf, our utilities.
Well, who's paying for the utilities? Is it Putney Community Center?
The community center pays the utilities. Yeah, so I forgot that the oil is $151 a month, and the heat is through a generous donation from Basketville's solar farm. Yeah. So they donate the credit to the community center.
Oh, nice.
Yes, it's a wonderful and generous arrangement.
So if I could ask, I think what I heard you say was that they've lost the Zumba class rental and they've lost the dog trainer rental, but the preschool is still paying rent, and the food shelf is still paying rent at the same rate it did before, even though it's using up more space.
Yes.
So what percentage of income have you lost because of those two? I don't know. You lose.
Well, it's also lost, I would guess, some income. I mean, not that it's heavily used for this purpose, but you know, it is available as a rental space for personal parties, et cetera, and presumably there has been some decrease in income.
Yeah, as of March, nobody was able to rent it. Hang on one sec.
I guess the thing that I was pointing at is it sounds like the food shelf is receiving a lot of donations, but the community center is not. That's what I think I heard you say. Okay, great. I was wondering how far down you are.
So hang on one sec. Okay, so the proposed 2020 budget, before COVID, this was how the proposed budget went. Rental income from the hall was predicted to be $3,500. Rental income from Wildflowers Play School, $3,575. Rental income from the food shelf, $3,600. And rental income from tables and chairs, $50. And the expected unrestricted donations of $2,000, which is not the case.
So I don't know that this is really the place for this discussion, but I'm wondering, Nancy, I think it's public knowledge that you have at times over the last handful of years considered other locations for the food shelf. Has your use of this space shifted that at all? I'm just wondering, you opened by saying there was a new board for the community center that apparently closely mirrors the food shelf board. Do you see things differently in that relationship going forward, or not?
We do. Speaking now as the food shelf at this point is not looking for new space.
And is it your sense that once the pandemic has passed, the community center will continue to be able to provide you a space that is sufficient for your needs? Or it's really hard to predict how long that's going to be, but
exactly. But we anticipate down the road that we would reduce the food, speaking as the food shelf, we would reduce the amount of space that we would need. We would go back to in-person shopping. Our food shelf goal is to have the community center space available again for public use.
So, you know, we've had a discussion somewhat about, after the merger of Putney Cares and Putney Family Services, how to continue funding the two of those. And I don't want to plant seeds for something that isn't going to grow, but is there a logical cohesive relationship between the food shelf and the community center, and then our tier A contributions could be shifted to just be two organizations and we could redistribute how we do that? Or am I reading too much into it?
The food shelf vision is that the two organizations would remain independent. They would not merge.
And is that for the purpose of continuing to get to tier A? I mean, again, I'm not intending to or wanting to put words in anybody's mouth, but I'm just wondering, is part of the thinking behind that because it would continue to get to tier A social services contributions, or is that unrelated?
The original thinking was that the Putney Community Center, which was founded in 1925, has a long and valued history in this town, and many people feel very strongly about it as an organization, and we wanted to respect that.
Okay.
So that was primary for us.
Sounds good. Thank you. Well, I certainly appreciate all the work that all of you are doing with both hats on, and I'm glad that the two organizations are able to have a congenial, good relationship. And however we can be supportive of that in a meaningful way, please, let us know.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the time.
Any other questions from anybody else on either of those organizations? David?
Yeah, so just to be clear, I wrote those numbers down that you gave me as fast as I could. It seemed like your budget was around $13,000, and it sounds like you've lost about 5,500 of that because of loss of rentals. But maybe I heard you wrong. And just trying to get some kind of numerical idea of how COVID has set you back, and how the limitations of using the building have set you back.
Well, those numbers that I gave you did not include the income from the town. So separate from that, yeah, so your figures are correct.
Okay, so the community center is behind about $1,500 of income, roughly.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, and you have 12,000 in the bank, in the
Yes.
account.
Yeah,
Okay.
approximately.
About 500 a month to operate, plus heat, which is another 150. Is that what you said?
Yes, that's $150 a month on the budget plan. Yep.
Okay. All right, got it. All right, gotcha. Thanks.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're welcome. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Everything.
Okay. So we presumably have somebody to speak about Putney Cares.
We have Kate Kelly and we have Maggie Cassidy, and Alan may jump in here.
Okay. Kate or Maggie, if either of you want to start off.
Maybe I'll start off answering the first two questions, and then Kate will respond to the third, if that's okay. I'd like to also thank the Select Board for giving us a forum to describe to you how COVID has affected what we do. COVID has I'm kind of taking the first two questions as one, because COVID has affected Putney Community Cares. It's increased our activity in some domains and decreased it in others. It's cut out completely the public use of our barn. And by public, I mean both rental, and we also rented that space to groups and families who wanted it. And it also was used for activities that we sponsor ourselves. Folk dance, Tai Chi, an art class, yoga. And so COVID has cut those completely out. Partly in response to that, we cut the hours of our coordinator, of our staff. And just a side note, and I hope it's okay that I mention this, our valued, beloved coordinator, Abby Jacobson, will be leaving the organization, and we are going to be looking for another coordinator. It's a part-time position, and so if anyone watching or listening is either interested yourself in this position, it's an administrative position, very part-time, or knows somebody who might be interested in looking at the position, I hope that you could contact me at mcassidy@savr.net, and I would be happy to let people know more about that. On the other hand, I think that COVID has increased our commitment and our activity in Meals on Wheels. We deliver several thousand Meals on Wheels every year. We're the designated agency with Senior Solutions to coordinate the volunteer packers and drivers. And when COVID hit, people who might not have met the criteria for Meals on Wheels became eligible. So those numbers went up. Otherwise, it's steady as she goes. Kate is our community advocate, and maybe she can speak very specifically about whether her workload as someone who is helping individuals locate and access resources from insurance to heating assistance to other kinds of services, how that's been affected. People don't come to the office so much, although they can come if they are masked and meet with her individually, but it's mostly by phone now, of course. So I'll turn it to Kate for that piece, and also for how the town might be helpful, how the community might be helpful.
So interestingly enough, I actually haven't seen a huge increase of financial emergency requests, which I attribute that to the COVID relief from the federal government. The fact that people who were on unemployment were getting the $600 extra, and people got the $1,200 check. So that's been about the same. One of the things that dramatically changed was both medical ride requests, because people were not going to the hospital or the doctor as an emergency or terribly serious because of the COVID, but also we lost a lot of medical ride volunteers. So I would say by half, we have half of the volunteers. So what that has meant is that I've relied a lot more on the people who are still volunteering, and there's a few of them that I rely a lot on. That's, in terms of what the town could help with. I'm not sure how the community could help would be if there was people who wanted to volunteer to do medical rides. And I totally understand people, because you're riding in a car with someone you don't know. So in terms of COVID, people might not want to do that. The other way in which the community could help, obviously, is donations to Putney Community Cares. We're always in need of donations. And another thing that the town of Putney could help with is, and this never even occurred to me until recently, is it would be really great if we could have a little description on the town website of Putney Community Cares with our embedded in that description, so that when people go on the town website, because I know like Putney Mutual Aid is on there and other things are on there. So if that's possible, that would be really helpful. Am I forgetting anything, Maggie? Maybe Maggie's still there.
Sorry, I was muted. No, I think those are the things that we had talked about before the meeting, so we'd be happy to answer questions.
Kate, just either Kate or Maggie, what's the financial relationship between you all and Meals on Wheels? How does that work? How does that work?
Kate, I'm the secretary. I stay away from the.
I don't believe there is any financial relationship.
Oh, Alan, do you want to jump in?
They don't charge us anything for.
Maybe I can work
They don't
on that.
charge us anything for the meals. Okay.
So,
Alan, yeah.
So the drivers are not paid, the packers are not paid, the meals come for free, they're delivered for free. We do get some very small checks from Senior Solutions, who organizes that countywide or statewide, I'm not sure which helps with our overhead. I don't, there comes irregularly in different amounts, so I'm not quite sure how much it is, but it's less than $1,000 a year that we've been getting in several checks a year that come. To tell you the truth, I'm not exactly sure why they give us that money. There's not a clear explanation that comes with the checks, but they do contribute in some way.
Right. Thank you. And sort of a separate question, but Meals on Wheels is somehow state organized, but it's also a nonprofit. Do you know?
I would say that at least locally, it's run by Senior Solutions. Whether or not it's its own organization above or below that, I don't know. But we deal with the staff at Senior Solutions, and they do most of the organizing for it, or beyond what, anything that we don't do to organize our own volunteers. We order the food through them, and I think the food comes from some place in Rutland, but I'm not sure what organization packs it at this point. It's been different organizations over the years.
Thank you.
For us right now, it's a place called Lindley, I think. It's like a catering, and Senior Solutions basically manages the whole thing, but each town that has it does the ordering because it fluctuates so much.
As per David's question from the last conversation, do you have solid numbers or anything, Kate, on loss of income related to use of your space?
Again, maybe I would be able to answer that better.
That would be an Alan question.
Okay.
So, I think that there's two ways that we've lost income. One is that we haven't rented the building. We haven't charged. We haven't. We normally, participants in our in barn programs pay a fee. So all that's gone. We usually do some fundraisers that didn't happen this year. We usually do a fundraiser at Putney School. That didn't happen. That's where you usually make several $1,000s there. That didn't happen. So I'm afraid that I don't have hard figures, but I would guess that perhaps $5,000 didn't come in because of fundraisers that didn't happen, or programs that didn't happen, or rentals that didn't happen. On the other hand, we had less staff time this year. We didn't need to organize the programs that weren't happening, and Abby was sick for a long time and was on a medical leave. And we did hire a replacement part of that time, but part of the time we just got by without her. So our expenses were lower and our income was lower. And I can't tell you for sure what the balance is, more or less.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, other questions related to Putney Community Cares?
The question I have, I think probably will take too long to answer, and I need to educate myself on it anyway, but how are you funded? Besides the donation we give you, where do you get your money to operate?
We have an annual fund appeal in the fall, which is, we're sort of in the middle of that. And we have usually at least a couple of other fund drives plus rentals and fees for participants. We occasionally get a grant from for instance, we built a stairway recently, and we applied for a grant, and that was paid in full by that grant. So we often get 1 or 2 grants a year from other organizations besides the town.
And do you get state support at all, Alan, or not?
No.
And roughly, what's your budget for a year? Just a number.
I think it's around 45,000.
Okay. And you're down about 5, roughly. So these rough figures, but just trying to put it in perspective.
Wild guess, yes.
Okay. All right.
I would just add to that our annual appeal is ongoing, and so that figure can change, and we would encourage anyone who could we would be very grateful for donations.
Okay.
Good.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank all of you for all the work you're doing as well, and thank you for taking the time to share information with us tonight. Let me just check. I had one. No, okay. Any other questions? All right, I think that's all we have. So thank you very much, and you're welcome to stay and continue attending, or you don't need to.
Thank
But
you.
thank you for all the information. Yes.
Thank you for what you do. Thank you so much for what you do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You
good
guys
night.
for having us on.
Yeah.
Night.
All right, so we're going to move on to some of the meat of our budget discussions, and I'm going to suggest that we try and move relatively quickly through these budget discussions, and maybe plan on the select board having a sit-down meeting sometime next week to really look at this stuff a little bit closer, and preferably in person, because I think that would be helpful for us. Masked, we could either do it in the select board room, distanced and masked, or perhaps use the library space or something. But I think it might be helpful for all of us to be in a room with paper copies in front of us to talk about things. So that would be a warned meeting.
And that needs to be open to the public.
That does need to be open to the public, and it could be, and we could do that either we could do that by screen. So I'll communicate with Karen about when we might plan that, and then she can coordinate with the two of you, and hopefully we can figure something out, because I find this very hard to do not in person. I just think trying to look at these papers and focus on a screen, and it's a little too much juggling for me. But having said that, we also have a couple things that we need to discuss in executive session. So we might want to, if we can find a time next week sometime that we can sit down for sort of at least a couple hours, I think that might be very helpful to all of us. So, but I don't want that to supersede some discussion tonight, particularly if there are any questions from the public. But our first item is Highway Department Preliminary Budget Discussion Draft 2. We started talking about this at our last meeting, and Karen has gone through some things and looked at it from a couple different directions. And so Karen, do you want to speak to the Highway Department discussion?
Sure. So I'm fairly comfortable with the Highway Draft 2, the way it is at the moment. Questions for the board are, we discussed having a equipment fund and possibly putting $130,000 of surplus money into that fund in order to move away from borrowing. I still have a little research to do, long-term look at borrowing and what the implication, of paying interest would be long-term. Short-term, it's fairly reasonable. It's small right now because we have equipment that's being paid off, and then we have a gap, and then like 2026, we start that uphill climb too if we're borrowing. In your packets too, I had sent you from People's United Bank some potential financing on the loader. If we were to borrow $163,000 with a 5-year note, we would be looking at over $12,000 in interest. And is that something we want to continue as a town, to borrow and pay interest to the bank? Again, the highway department, it's in a fairly good position right now because Brian runs an efficient department, and we're seeing surplus. So possibly having in the equipment fund. I think the first year it appears that we would have to borrow for a loader if we were to purchase it, for fiscal 23, or actually for fiscal 22, and have the payment in 23, because we don't have enough surplus to buy the loader outright. A second alternative is to pay for half of the loader, with half of the surplus, and then borrow the other half. And then we did discuss delaying purchasing the loader, which we have a capital plan. Members of the select board, we do have a capital plan, and it's created for a reason. So when equipment outlives its date of use, especially in the highway department where you need dump trucks, you need everything to be running, especially in the wintertime, delaying a purchase for a piece of equipment may get us in some trouble if that piece of equipment breaks down and we really need it. So I want to caution the board, and we really need to think that through.
So I have a comment on that, if I could now, Karen. I don't know if I'm cutting you off. I hope I'm not. There must be a way that we can come up with an assessment on a piece of equipment, some kind of plan to assess it, because every year that we can use it where it's not going to break down past the point we stop paying for it pays us huge dividends. And especially now when we're trying to create a reserve fund each year, if we were to keep that loader one more year and it worked fine for us, then that would be the $32,000 more towards the fund, and we could leave all 130 in it. I agree that we don't want to do it if we're at risk, so there must be some way to make some, fairly reliable assessment on whether the loader needs to be replaced because it needs to be replaced, or whether we're replacing it because it's part of a plan and now's the date. So I don't know exactly how to do that with the equipment. I know how to do it in my shop. And I think that being frugal that way, it has enough of a value that we ought to look at that. Take what you said seriously and look at some kind of assessment system.
And Brian's looking at that. He's looking at every single piece of equipment. The same, and Tom's doing the same thing at the fire department.
Good.
Going through everything.
So I actually, every time I buy a car, I buy used cars, and every time I buy a used car, before I buy it, I bring it to a mechanic and have them look at it and tell me when is something going to go. And so I wonder, I think Brian, as much as he knows about the vehicles is great, and as much as Tom knows about the vehicles, but I wonder if we want to actually get a specific mechanic who knows what to look for. Maybe Brian and Tom already know this. I don't know. I wouldn't if I were in their positions. So I wonder if we want to think about actually having somebody that we pay to go through and look at things when they're up for renewal or whatever.
When these vehicles go to Twin State,
Yeah.
Brian and Tom have them go through everything. They look at what will be the next thing.
Great.
I trust both of them for,
So they can relay that information to us very specifically?
Yes.
Okay. So
And we've done that, Bara, specifically for the purpose of considering extending the life of a vehicle as well. We have had Tri-State go through vehicles for us and give us an estimate of what they think it might need, within 12 months, 24 months, so on and so forth for this purpose. So it's not a practice we've never done. I think that making it a more common practice for us might be a good idea.
I wonder, go ahead.
The other thing that we did relatively recently with a fire truck, you may or may not know, was we had it refurbished, and that extended its life dramatically. I know we've considered that with dump trucks from time to time, and in my recollection anyway, we have decided that with our trucks at the point they are, that it hasn't made sense. But with something like a loader, it might be well worth taking it to, I don't even remember what the brand of the loader is, but an organization like Nortrax, that's what they do. Take it and say, hey, we want to get 10 more years out of this, or 3 more years out of this. Do everything it needs to do. That would be another way to approach it. So it sounds like Brian is thinking about that. I also think, Karen, you said somewhere in your notes that, and I'm not trying to quote you, so don't take it as a quote, but something along the lines of, we'd be pushing ourselves to do this within the next 2 or 3 years. And I think that we should definitely be looking at this shift towards a reserve fund approach. But I don't think we should be in a hurry to do it. I mean, I think we should be as timely about it as we can. But if it takes us 10 years to get to that point, it takes us 10 years to get to that point. And if that means putting aside a certain amount and borrowing a certain amount for X number of years, while we get there, we're paying, I mean, if we could, on each of those vehicles, the example of paying half and servicing and borrowing half, on that loan that you were talking about, that's $12,000 in interest, well, now it's $6,000 in interest. So, I think that we should just not worry about trying to make this change. I mean, the sooner the better, probably, particularly given the fact that we've been in a low interest rate atmosphere for so long. One can only assume that's going to last for so long, but people have been saying that for 8 years now, so it's hard to say. But I think that as long as that continues, we should feel comfortable taking some advantage of that if we need to, in order to look at a longer term horizon for really getting this accomplished without pushing any single buttons too hard. The other thing I wondered about, Karen, is whether we might not want to sit down with somebody with somewhat longer term municipal financing experience and have them consider this with us. And the 2 people that occurred to me for that were Cynthia Stoddard and or Chip Stearns. They're both people that have worked for NIMRIC and or with municipalities for many years in their analysis of things like this. And I very much respect your abilities and your qualifications, but I do think having somebody who has done exactly that kind of work for 25 or 30 years might be able to advise us in helpful ways. And I wouldn't want to step on your toes as finance director, but if that feels like it might be something helpful for us as a board to do with you and somebody else, I would certainly think that would be a possibility.
Well, just to throw this out there, and I agree with what you've said thus far, I do reach out to Chip, and I know Russ at Westminster too, so I talked to him, and Newfane. So I am reaching out to different people. Everybody does it a little bit differently. Putney's always, borrowed, which hasn't been bad, when it's a conventional loan. And truthfully, the 3 bond bank notes that we have, that's what's really holding us down. And I expect, Josh, that if this board decides to go with an equipment fund, especially for the highway department, it's going to take a little time.
Yes.
We have to agree on what the numbers should be, and how we're going to approach this. This is not going to happen overnight, and it's going to be a slow transition.
And it doesn't, and that's okay. We don't need it to happen overnight, and we shouldn't expect it to happen overnight, because we're likely to put ourselves in jeopardy if we were to try to make that happen.
Correct.
I would like to say I agree with everything that you've said so far, but I think that we should also really take advantage of this time right now as much as we possibly can because the payments are lower, and we could get a 10 or 15 or 20% head start of where we would be had we not had these lower amount of payments and 2 or 3 trucks that have 3 or 4 years before they have to be replaced. If we take advantage of that, I know the more money you can put up front, just like with the loan with the loader, the more money we can put in that account now without putting ourselves in jeopardy, the shorter a period of time it's going to take for us to get to where we want to be. So I think we need to look at that too and take that seriously. Yep.
So what's the time frame for making a decision? Well, the time frame for making a decision on this budget and therefore decisions on equipment purchases, et cetera, is basically having it done in time to send it for the town report. Is that correct? So end of January-ish?
Yeah, it is like no later than the 31st.
Of January.
Right, because that's when the warning and the notice for town meeting has to be posted by January 31st. So if we have a meeting next week and then January 13th would be a regular meeting, we should be pretty close.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting, and I don't want to suggest that we should push it till January 30th to make a decision.
No.
But if we had some time in the next couple weeks to really consider these things a little further, I think that would be.
Our budgets are really close to where I'm comfortable. So the highway, water and sewer, I'm comfortable with those 2 budgets. The library is the library. The general fund, what I've tried to do is level fund all the budgets.
Right.
So we don't have to raise taxes.
And of course, everybody needs to remember that a much bigger driver than our municipal taxes is the education tax. So even if we keep our taxes level funded, there's a very high likelihood that your property taxes are going to go up this year because of education. And not,
that is accurate.
That's just the reality. But, we work every year hard at trying to be as good and as fair as we can with the municipal budget. But your actual tax bill is largely governed by the education, or not, 2/3 of it is governed by the education fund. So,
correct.
David.
And I know this is not the time for this, but I'm going to ask you this anyway, Karen. I saw the email from Ann Beekman and the projection of another $931,000 in the budget and a possible increase of 0.095. And I don't know what that means to us in numbers. What does that actually mean to us in numbers? What part of that 931 would we be responsible for? Is there any way to know that?
There will be in the next coming meetings by January 13th. She has another meeting.
Okay.
We can always. I wanted them to address the select board as well.
Okay.
But they have a meeting on January 13th, so they may not be able to see us until like January, the last meeting in January. I think it's important that the community of Putney pays attention to the school district. They have a draft budget at the moment. Most likely it's going to change. I don't know what the numbers are going to be, David. I haven't even looked at the draft yet.
Okay. All right.
And I would not speak on the school district budget whatsoever.
Right.
I would want our representatives to do that, which are Ann Beekman and Liz Adams.
And I think we need to be very cognizant of the fact that we have zero jurisdiction.
Right.
So we were inviting them to a select board meeting. It would be strictly for the purpose of giving them a platform to discuss. Their budget has nothing to do with us. So,
right.
And we don't have any, That's not our territory. So I just wanted hearing you say that, and I'm not disagreeing, but really from my perspective, the sole reason for doing that would be to just have a larger platform for them, because it is not our purview to talk about the education budget at
Right.
all.
No.
I understand that. It affects us because the increase might affect what we have to do in our budget. And if we have a limited amount of time to figure out our budget, the sooner we know their numbers, the better for us and what we have to decide.
I can't gauge our budget.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I can't gauge our budget on the school budget. I'm sorry, but like I said, I've tried to level fund all of these budgets, and I've trimmed as much fat out of these budgets as possible. And whatever happens with the school budget, again, we have no control over that. But from the town municipal side of property taxes, I will do my best to keep our rates low.
Bara.
I don't know procedurally where we are, whether Karen, you wanted to keep going. I have questions on the 44 pages that we received, but I'm happy to wait if you wanted to go on.
I just want to make one more comment, or not comment about it, but just an observation, David. In my recollection, we have never known the education budget until well after, because we tend not to know that until after the grand list has been filed. So we will already had, typically, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, probably the better part of a couple months of knowing our grand list and knowing what our tax rate is likely to be before we have any idea what the education tax is going to be. So, we can't possibly use it as a tool to go, other than the fact that we can almost definitely rest assured that it will increase, because I can't remember a year when it hasn't. Other than that, we don't know what it'll do. So we can't really, as Karen said, we can do the best we can do on the municipal, and then it's out of our hands. So. But Barry, you should feel free to go ahead, start firing questions if you have them.
I don't know. First, Karen, did you want to go through anything to lay groundwork, or do you want me to ask questions?
You can go ahead and ask questions. I mean, if we're going to meet next week.
Yeah, and I can also wait until then. So Josh, I don't know what your ideas are. If you want to get through this quickly and move on to other things, I'm happy to wait till we meet specifically on the budget.
Well, I think one thing that might be helpful is to talk a little bit about these possible transfers of funds from different places, and I think that's one of the places that I feel like it would be helpful for us to be sort of sitting down together, is what that looks like. But Karen, if you want to give a little bit of an overview of that so people have a sense, Go ahead, Bara. Yeah.
Just before you do that, I just wanted to ask, did you, Karen, and Josh sit down last meeting? We talked about that there was this question that wanted to be clarified. Did you talk about that, and is there an answer?
We talked about it a little bit. The question you're referring to, I think, is why we might delay the purchase of a grader. I think that Karen's point about there being, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Karen, but I think Karen's point about there being a capital plan and a reason for that is certainly asserted in good faith and taken in good faith, that that's a wise way to do it. I think that we are in a unique position, as David has pointed out, to shift that equation in a way that could be very beneficial to us, but also carry some risk. So I think that, Karen, I think the biggest difference would be a willingness to assume some risk in delaying it. I think that there really isn't, other than the obvious financial benefit of running a piece of equipment that we're not making payments on for an additional year, which is going to save us money as long as it goes well for us, then I don't think that there's a compelling reason to not wait, because we're going to be paying the same amount in year 2, regardless of what we do in year 1. assuming that we purchased both pieces of equipment in year 2. It just, I think the desire to have it be distributed as evenly as possible is a good and admirable desire, but if it can shift the equation in our favor by bumping one off, then I don't think there's a downside to doing it. It would be, from my perspective, the one time there would be a downside to that would be if they were both 5-year notes, for example, would be in year 6. If we had to borrow money on both of them, in year 6, we'd be still making payments on 2 pieces of equipment, as opposed to having made a payment on 1 piece of equipment in year 5 and year 1 and 1 piece of equipment in year 6, because the 2 are staggered. But just different ways of looking at sort of the same equation, really. So
Okay, thanks.
The capital plan lays that out too, Bara. And it's a little hard to read if you don't have your head in it like every day.
Even if you do.
It changes, it's like, and you're predicting, like 5 years out, and it's like, and we're looking at the first payment will be in 23, but we're doing a budget for 22, and then we're looking at, what we did in 20, and it just, sometimes it's confusing, but
yeah.
But we can go over all of that too in a meeting where we're all sitting down together.
Okay.
I do think that's an important point also, though, that when we're looking at a piece of equipment in a circumstance like we're in right now, we're really projecting pretty far out. Obviously on the capital plan we would be, but if you look at the loader, for example, that's not a piece of equipment we would be looking to purchase right away anyway. So, there's already sort of a year lag period on what we're discussing now and
right.
what that if you say, for example, that we were going to, for a 21-22 budget, we were maybe going to purchase a loader, that loader would likely arrive on our doorstep in, I don't know, October-ish, perhaps, 21. So, we're almost a year out before that happens. So
right.
That makes that equation of guessing on how, so you really, for all practical purposes, Brian has to be able to look at that thing and say, yeah, I think I'm going to get 2 years out of this in order to make that a viable opinion on that. And that's tricky, but.
I wanted to make a comment too about the risk part of it too. The risk part isn't a straight line across the board for the equipment, because different equipment gets used in different ways and lasts in different ways. The risk of keeping a truck that gets used every single day and it's one of 5 and we need all 5 all the time is a different level of risk than a loader that might get used for 15 minutes and shut off for 2 hours and used for 15 minutes and shut off for 2 hours, or maybe not used for a period of days or weeks or whatever. So the risk level on that is much different. And I think that when we do the capital plan and we look at the assessment, we need to take that into consideration too, which I'm sure Brian and Tom are. But so we do set in even a slightly better position, because it's not a truck that we're looking at. It is a loader that we're looking at.
And I think the one other thing I would add to that is the reality that if a loader breaks down, we could have another one at the highway department probably within 24 hours, even if it had to be a rental or a replacement, a temporary replacement. Whereas with a municipal truck, they're not sitting there. You just can't find them. So
you can't borrow them from another town either.
There aren't dealerships that have them sitting on a lot all set up the way we need them. Whereas with a loader, again, literally, you could probably call Nortrax and have one of those things here in 3 hours.
3 hours, exactly.
So,
yeah, well, there's a lot of different factors, and the loader too is needed for the gravel pits,
right.
So we have to keep that in mind too. But there are a lot of different things we have to look at.
But as far as risk of being able to provide services, David's right. It's a very different piece of equipment than some of the others. So,
right.
All right. Sorry.
One more quick comment, and that is that for me, whatever it's worth, and you can ask any questions you want now, Bara, but I went over this and actually stopped it and talked to Karen about it a lot today, so I'm all set. with it. So
Yeah, he's been with me for 2 days. And Barry, you can call me anytime.
I'm also fine with just waiting until we're meeting. There's specific things about budgeting. So now that we have this plan to meet specifically for the budget, and we have a lot still on our agenda, I would be happy to move on.
Okay, sounds good. I guess I would ask you, Karen, if there's anything else from these 5 categories of budget that we have listed here, highway, general, sewer, water, and library, that you feel should be highlighted right now, or are you comfortable that if we meet next week, then on the 13th, we could have a conversation and you could relay anything you might need to?
I just wanted to mention in your packets, so you have long-term debt and you have the capital plan, but you also have a document from the fire department, for their capital planning. And I'm not sure if everyone saw that and you reviewed it, and you might have questions for Tom. It might be a little confusing to you. Obviously, I can read it because Tom and I have discussed this. And again, this is kind of what we've been talking about, is he's gone through the department and listed, what's going to be needed in the future. And through surplus money, setting up a specific reserve fund for the fire department for capital improvements or equipment will help with either purchasing 100% or looking to borrow. Again, to the board, with surplus money, between 8 to 12% should be kept in the budget as unrestricted in case of an emergency. But any excess money either can be set up in a specific reserve fund, or you can choose to give it back to the taxpayers.
And I just wanted to, giving it back to the taxpayers, and I alluded to this earlier, but is not necessarily a particularly practical way to do it, sort of issuing refund checks. But adding it to next year's general fund budget as an unrestricted quote unquote contribution to that, is a way of keeping the taxes down going forward, and we've certainly done that in the past. And, the thing that's frustrating about it is that it takes a surprisingly large amount of money added to our budget to make any substantial difference as far as that looks on any one person's taxes. It all adds up, so it's real, definitely.
Right.
But, Karen and I, basically the translation is that a 1 penny increase on the tax rate translates to 24,000. So
Correct.
you put that in reverse. If we give back 24,000, that keeps the tax rate from going up by a penny.
Yeah.
Any one taxpayer does not get a huge amount of influence from that. I mean, if you could give back 2 million, yeah, that would make a big difference. But,
Right.
Every little bit helps, and I understand that,
Yeah.
but it's a frustratingly small number. And if we can use it to our advantage and not adversely affect taxpayers by having to jump by a large amount in spite of that, then that's sort of a preferable route from my perspective.
Can I just clarify one thing? When I said give back, what I really mean is that we would put it in the budget to reduce the taxes to be raised.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I sort of assumed that. I just wanted to clarify that. I mean, anybody who we wouldn't, it would be paying it forward more than giving it back.
Correct. Thank you.
David.
Tom, if I look at the schedule you got here, it looks like what the the payments that increase, excuse me, the contributions that increase come from when a payment for a piece of equipment stops, and then the money that was already set up to make the payments on that piece of equipment would then feed that equipment fund. Am I reading that right?
That's correct. That, yes.
Okay.
The only thing that, well, is sort of in that same boat would be the initial deposit into that account
Yeah, I
of
was wondering
$13,000 in fiscal year 22.
Yep.
That what we would like to propose is that be the dollar amount that we are going to be receiving from the Department of Public Safety as part of our their part of paying for our diesel exhaust system at the firehouse.
But we could also consider, as we've been talking about with the higher, I mean, we have fairly significant surpluses in both the general fund and the highway fund. So, you know, we could consider, and I don't get your hopes up, Tom, because I'm only mentioning this as consideration. But in the same way that we're talking about that, because the fire department is within the general fund, we could also take a chunk of that and put it towards equipment. You know, that's some of that surplus. And in some ways that acts in the same manner as paying it forward on reducing next year's taxes, because it allows us to build against having to spend or borrow more in the future. So just a whole bunch of different ways of looking at the same puzzle pieces.
And we can discuss this further because I have other ideas too.
Yeah.
That, you know, by paying off a loan early, you know, that money's already in that budget for that following year. So that would become surplus.
Right.
Can I ask you a question about that? If because it's the general fund and not the highway fund, it isn't just our decision, it has to get voted on, right? Is that right? So if something was, we've been given approval to buy a truck for the fire department and then the payments end, do we automatically get to keep that amount of money in the budget for something else? Or do we have to do, is there some other, you know, procedure we have to do to then use that money for a future truck, for something that isn't specific? How do we do that? Do we have free reign to do that any way we want to?
Well, we have a capital reserve fund already. So surplus money can go in there and it can be used for like fire department, or it could be used for town hall. But if you want it specifically designated to one specific thing, then it has to be in that account. Now with the highway department, the board can vote at a regular meeting to set up an equipment fund if they choose to. They can vote to buy a vehicle if they choose to, because keeping the roads maintained is any town's first priority. And that particular budget is separated from the general fund budget. So whatever's in the highway budget stays in the highway. And as far as the general fund goes, yes, David, I'm going to have to look at that, but I think you're right that the voters at town meeting through an article can create new reserve funds.
So
but again, if the capital fund is already established, then surplus money can go into that.
So if, for example, we could show them this plan, and if they voted it in, then putting the payments as they drop off from the equipment could go right into that. That's what you're saying.
They're not voting this plan in.
Okay.
But essentially what we could do is have an article asking the town to decide whether they would support the select board moving $50,000 from surplus into a capital equipment fund. Yeah. And then essentially this plan would be part of the argument on the select board's part for doing that. Say, this is the reason we're doing it, because in 10 years, it's going to mean that we're saving more money.
I
Right.
got it. Thank you for that. That was just for educating me. Okay.
Okay, so, okay, any other questions on these budget items that we need to discuss right now, or should we think about the?
Josh, if I can ask just one question?
Yes.
On the other side of this sheet of paper are going to be about 13 sheets of paper that lay out the expenditure side of this over time.
Yeah.
So I understand you guys are packed tonight, and I've got 2 other things that I need to take care of tonight before I can go home. So would it, by the time you have a meeting next week, we'll have that pretty well laid out? Would you prefer that we hold off talking about this more specifically until next week, or?
That's probably just, if you're going to have more data by then, Tom, that's probably more helpful for us. So,
okay. I just want people to understand very clearly, and this is the first time in 3 attempts of us trying to bring this to the board that we're actually here now. So yeah. I just want to make sure everybody knows very, very clearly, we're not talking about capital expenditures only for apparatus.
Right.
Right.
We've got a boatload of equipment down here that 10 years ago, a lot of it was $500 there, $1,000 here. Now we're talking some pretty substantial money for this stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll be able to show that to you and lay that out for you. Just to show that this, in my mind anyways, in our view, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. The one other thing that did come up is people's, the concept, and it's very true, that the huge lion's share of our debt burden is based on our bonds, and particularly our interest burden. The reality is that, and I think I might have said this at the last meeting too, but there are going to be expenses for which we have to bond. I mean,
Right.
Unless we become an incredibly wealthy and have huge reserve funds, when, for example, a sewer fund or a sewer plant or a water plant needs to be replaced, that infrastructure, those are massive numbers. So I don't think that we should beat up ourselves about having those bonds. I think that we have higher rates than we would get right now, and that's unfortunate because it means we're paying higher interest than we would ideally be paying. But it's also just a reality of municipal function that if we're going to provide services like that, there are going to be times every X number of years that we're going to have to bond for things because we just can't possibly afford to do them on our own. So, all right.
That's even more than fiscally healthy as possible in every other way, so that when we get those bonds, there's right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and again, if you're fortunate, I mean, the gravel pit being a good example, if we had a large enough fund built up, we could have said, well, let's put $300,000 towards that, and
Right.
we only have to finance $700,000, and that would have been better for us. But we also got a very good rate on that bond, so that was a good thing. But most of that other debt is older and I think it's close to a 4% rate, which is still good, but not great. And over 30 years, you pay a heck of a lot of interest. So,
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Mr. Chairman, this has been an unusual discussion this evening because you've been discussing the budget, but you've also been saying that you're going to discuss the budget at another meeting you will have next week where, quote, you will sit down together.
Yes.
So in this regard, I'm going to remind you of the Vermont open meeting law. As usual, I'm looking at the statute. Pardon me.
We talked about that, Howard.
Yeah, it'll be warned.
I believe I have the floor and would like to speak. May I do so?
Go ahead.
Business of the public body means the public body's governmental functions, including any matter over which the public body has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power, which in your case includes budgets. Meeting means a gathering of a quorum of the members of the public body for the purpose of discussing the business of the public body or for the purpose of taking action. In other words, your meeting next week will be a special meeting of the Town of Putney Select Board.
Correct,
Yeah.
and it will be duly warned, et cetera.
I just want to make clear that in no way will that meeting next week be, nor could it be, an informal meeting where you sit down together to discuss the budget, even if you let the public listen to it.
No, that wasn't the intention or the assertion, and I apologize if it came across that way. The idea was, I mean, partly it's because, as you are well aware, because you attend them, our last several, if not several more than that, meetings have gone well into the evening on a Wednesday night, and that leaves us with not a lot of time to take care of some business that, like this, that's more time consuming. And so essentially, yes, I'm suggesting we're adding a special meeting for the purpose, for a dual purpose. One would be for a different, slightly more quote unquote intimate discussion of the budget issues. And then also we have some executive session work that we have to do. So I would like it to include that as well. And at the time that we were entering a meeting for that, and particularly entering executive session, we would warn that appropriately as well, and enter it for the purposes necessary. But yes, no, definitely not. I mean, hopefully, maybe a slightly less formal meeting, but not in a less formal context, in the sense that it would not be accessible to others. So what we have to figure out is, if we're going to sit down in a room together, you know, we basically have to have a camera and a way for the public to interact. And so similar format to this, but just an ability for the four of us to be in one space at one time. David.
Darren, can I ask you one quick question? Looking at this long-term debt thing, the fire station, the water system, and the sewer system were refinanced, and they were refinanced at 3.93%. You told us last week how often you can refinance, and I don't know when that is for us.
10 years.
10 years.
When did you do this?
Yeah.
How many years ago?
And that was done, I think, in 2016.
Okay,
Roughly.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, you just burst my bubble.
All right. I get to do that once in a while.
And I think I may have said this before, but you know, the reality is that getting 3.93 was a good deal for us. My recollection is most of those were, well, it was 3 different loans that we consolidated. I think it was 3 that were consolidated into one and refinanced at that level. But we were looking in the 5s and 6s at least, I think, when we did that. So we did better by that. But you know, the other thing is, I think it's a different formula, David, for refinance than it is for initial bond. And so those rates, I might be wrong about that, but my memory is that those rates tend to be a little bit higher. But anyway, okay, so moving on from the budget for now. So Jane, Katz Field, and Jane, I want to apologize to you up front, because I know that you left a message for me and I've been meaning to call you and haven't done it. I don't know whether that's related or not, but that's separate. But request to warn for Medicare-for-All resolution. And as I said earlier, I do think that, unless I'm mistaken, both this and what Gino are talking about are presumably non-binding resolutions, so not things that we can truly act on via an article of the town. So they probably ultimately will fall under other business, but we need to check in this odd year of potentially odd town meetings, what's that going to look like, and we'll follow up on that. But Jane, go ahead, please.
Well, in that context, I mean, should I present this as something that I'd like the select board to take up, or are you saying that you don't have the power to decide that one way or the other?
I don't think we do. And I mean, we could leave it at that we will explore that before our next meeting and let you know for sure. The other thing, I know you weren't present last week and that, or 2 weeks ago. We did definitely have a discussion about this. And I think that certainly my sense is, the sense of the board is, we all agree with you that this is a good idea and that it's something that should ultimately happen. And if the town of Putney can in any way motivate it, that would be great. But it's really a legislative action, not a local select board action. Well, and I'm not even sure it's a legislative, it's a national legislative action rather than a select board action or a state legislative. But if you want to elaborate a little bit, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective on why it's important for us to be thinking about.
Yeah, well, this is, I'm asking the select board to warn an advisory resolution in support of a national single payer healthcare system. Because with the increasing prevalence of COVID and the governor's restrictions on activities, it would be challenging and dangerous for a group of us to get signatures for a petition from town residents. And I think it's important to give the voters of Putney an opportunity to decide if they want to vote in favor of this resolution that supports the provision of health coverage for every citizen, regardless of income, health status, or employment status. A Fox News post-election poll found that 72% of voters in the country now favor Medicare for all, and I suspect that Putney residents may be even more than that. And the need for this has been super magnified since COVID has caused many to lose their jobs, and with the loss of their jobs, they lose their employer-based health insurance. And it's important, I think, to understand the context of this. More than 50 municipalities across the country have passed resolutions endorsing Medicare for all. Such places like Philadelphia, Detroit, Knoxville, New Orleans, Birmingham is considering it now, as well as small towns. There are 4 towns, including Hanover, Peterborough in New Hampshire, have passed it already. Last month, I don't think we've been told about this enough, but the Vermont Medical Society, which represents 2,400 Vermont physicians and physician assistants, became the second state medical society in the United States to formally endorse the single-payer national health program, which is powerful. The issue of healthcare reform has an enormous impact on our little town of Putney. Under a single-payer healthcare system, all our residents would be covered for medical needs in a comprehensive way with no out-of-pocket expenses. The health of our community would benefit tremendously under this system, and disparities would be lessened. And as the resolution points out, I did revise it because I was told that the town doesn't have jurisdiction over the school health employees, but just for our 10 employees, we would save $150,000 a year in healthcare expenditures for our 10 employees under Medicare for All. And there's no question that property taxes would be reduced significantly under Medicare for All with the elimination of school district health insurance premiums and other medical costs. It was very hard for me to learn how our taxpayer dollars, what percent of those I can attribute to paying for the healthcare expenditures for our school employees. I'm continuing that, trying to understand that and get those figures, but there's no question that property taxes would be. So I think it's a significant situation. I think it's important for voters in Putney to be able to express their opinion on this huge issue. It's part of a movement across this country. It's not just our town, it's many, many big cities. And that's why I'm appealing to the select board to warn the advisory resolution.
Okay, good, thank you. my guess is, and again, we'll have to find out, this will be up to the Secretary of State, but you know, we've had the discussion about having all of the articles voted on by Australian ballot. And I'm not sure what the implications of that would be for non-binding resolutions. So because this is an action, because it would, I think, just by virtue of its nature, be non-binding, because we can't make that decision other than to say it is our recommendation and desire that this can be considered. I think that's the category it would fall under. And so I'm not sure when if we're going to do an odd variation of town meeting in which we're not all sitting in a room and talking about these things, how does the non-binding resolution proceed? So we'll explore that.
Josh, I don't know if this qualifies, but there is a resolve. There are 2 resolves at the end for the select board to communicate to our 2 senators and representative that they should work harder, that Leahy should talk more about this, that he should co-sponsor the emergency healthcare bill, which he has not, which he has not. So there is a specific action that is requested at the end.
I don't believe that those, again, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I don't think they fall under the typical nature of our articles, which is a very clear, specific action that we can take that's directly related to our role. And again, I'm just doing this from recollection, but when we've talked about these things, essentially what it has been is that it's a resolution that the town passes as, you know, essentially often these things are all but unanimous coming from the floor at town meeting. And if that's the case, then the select board takes that as a mandate from the voters, and we would act on it by writing an appropriate letter, et cetera, which we have certainly done in the past. But I don't think it would fall into article territory, but I could be completely misspeaking. So, but what we'll do is before we need to have our articles fully warned, we'll take it on our as a responsibility to make sure that we have explored that and given you an appropriate opportunity to present it as it should best be presented if it's not under our article. So, you know, in a year where we may end up having everything by Australian ballot, could this be added on as an optional non-town issue? I don't know how this works in a year like this. So again, I'm not disagreeing with you, Jane. I just don't know.
Okay, but it leaves me in a position like if I were going to present it as a petition, I only have 2 weeks starting now.
Yeah. So we'll try and do that homework as soon as possible. I mean, my own personal feeling, and I stated this at the last meeting too, is that we certainly, you know, to me, this is a legitimate resolution brought about a legitimate issue. I would vote in favor of including it if that falls under our purview, but I'm not sure it does because I don't think it's going to fall under an article. So Karen, it looks like Karen's trying to comment.
Yeah. So can I just add, so January 8th, the Secretary of the State should have more information on town meeting and how towns can approach it. As far as non-binding resolutions or articles, I recommend highly that you speak to John Johnson. He's the town clerk. And
yeah, I've tried. I don't get responses.
Yeah, so know what the process is, because if you have to get signatures, you're going to want to do that soon, because to file the petition, you have up until January 14th.
Right,
So,
I know, I'm aware.
Yeah.
So should I go through that dangerous work?
No, well, I guess what I'm saying, Jane, is that, and I want to be cautious about setting a precedent by saying this, because I can imagine others coming forward with articles or proposals for resolutions that I wouldn't necessarily say this for. But in this circumstance, I can give you my assurance that I would vote in favor of including this without you having to go and do and get signatures. So I don't know really beyond that what I can say, because if it's a non-binding resolution, I don't think you need signatures. So if it's a non-binding resolution and it falls under other business, how does that work if we do it by Australian ballot? That's going to be up to the Secretary of State. It's not,
Right.
or it may be up to the Secretary of State to tell us that it's up to us, and I'm not sure how that's going to pan out. But I guess what I can tell you is that I will do my best to get this information in front of voters for town meeting. Whether it ends up being an article or a non-binding resolution, I think it's an appropriate thing for us to be talking about and acting on, but I don't think it falls fully under the sort of typical select board purview. So I just don't have a proper answer for you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Mr. Fairman, go ahead.
I can, pardon me, I'm looking at the statute. I can shed some light on this simply for purposes of information, not pretending to be an attorney. I'm looking at 17 VSA section 2642.
Sorry, can you repeat that slower, Mr. Fairman? 17
VSA section 2642, 3A. Now, this is the statute that governs town meetings, and it says, the warning shall also contain any article or articles requested by a petition signed by at least 5% of the voters of the municipality and filed with the municipal clerk not less than 47 days before the day of the meeting. The statute does not anywhere mention non-binding resolutions. In other words, Dr. Katz Field is certainly free to petition an article onto the warning in the main body, which will she has to collect the signatures. But in that regard, I can tell you, I'm in the middle of a consultation with the Office of the Secretary of State at the moment regarding this, because the legislature passed Act 162, where they said that people who wish to run for local office do not have to collect signatures, but right. They forgot people collecting signatures to petition articles. The Office of the Secretary of State has no authority to do anything other than what the law suggests, and despite what you said earlier, neither do you. But I'm about to begin lobbying the legislature to, as soon as they meet, amend Act 162 to absolve citizens of collecting signatures to petition articles, because the dangers are exactly the same as those faced by people who wish to be candidates. So I'll let you know how that goes, but that's where it stands at the moment.
So the one clarification, I agree. I agree with everything you just said, and I'm aware of that. The one thing that I think that's important to what I was talking about and to the select board is that if we choose to include an article, then that work on getting petitions is not required. So somebody can come to us and ask us to put an article on, and we can either agree to do that, or we can say you need to get it petitioned. So I guess what I'm saying is, depending on sort of where this art, I mean, I'm giving Jane my opinion, and again, this is a single person on the select board, but I'm saying that if it's up to me, I will allow this to be put on as an article if that's the appropriate place for it, and the select board has the option of placing it in that arena. So, because we don't have to require people to petition, we can just choose to accept their article and put it on as an article. But I don't know whether this falls into that category. So,
So if I want to be sure that it's brought up, I would have to get a petition.
You know, I don't know that for sure. I mean, I think that depends on, what the Secretary of State says. I think that depends on
How we do town meeting.
and how we do town meeting. And I guess this maybe is a question that we need to try to get answered before, because of the timeliness of it. Since we're going to end up having a special meeting next week, maybe I'll try and get this question answered before next week, Jane, and try and give you some reasonable guidance, because I just don't know what the answer is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So can I just add too that the town clerks have a resource called MuniNet, and they all chatter back and forth. So everybody's asking the same questions. So we might get some more information, you know, in a week. Now, Jonathan has been on vacation, so that might be the reason why he hasn't returned your call, Jane. Kim is in the office. She is the assistant town clerk. But we're doing our best to figure this out, because not a whole lot of information is coming down, and all the towns have the same questions. So we're doing our best to get information out to the public.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Alan, something to add?
So I don't know exactly what the law says, but certainly we have tradition in Putney of presenting this type of request at town meeting. We have very good discussions about it. I think it's an important part of our town government to have this discussion and vote. So I strongly encourage us to continue to work on figuring out a way to have this discussion and vote at whatever our town meeting looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that,
to add that, I think, assuming we're having a town report that's mailed out like we usually do, if these could be printed in the town report as well, that would be great, so that people can think about it ahead of time.
Yeah, and that was what I was trying to go back. I said earlier in the meeting that I went back to previous, and non-binding resolutions don't typically get printed in advance. So that's why I'm so unclear about it, because I just don't know. I don't know.
I think, you know, it's a 50-page document. I think we've got room to write 3 sentences about these non-binding resolutions. And I think I would encourage us to include it if we can figure out a way to do it.
That's a good point, Alan. And all the deadlines for town meeting still must be met, even though we don't know if we're going to be meeting on March 2nd. Because some towns are talking about postponing until like spring, where everybody can meet outside. So it's up to the board how we do this. But if all the articles are on Australian ballot, you know, obviously the resolution is something we got to figure out. But it's a good point that we put it in the town report, Alan, and those will be out on time. The other thing too is any article that's being voted on at town meeting, we have to have public informational meetings. So we can start doing that as soon as we approve the warning for town meeting.
Right.
And I would encourage, and if that's the way we go, that we get more people, you know, virtually to have a bigger discussion, especially on the budget and any non-binding resolutions.
And it may turn out that this can be just warned as an article and it's not a non-binding resolution. It's just that's the way it reads to me. So I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, and I think we just need to get the information and just not, you know, we need to be careful that we do this appropriately. And by January 8th, I'm hoping we have directive from the Secretary of the State.
Yeah, the other, I mean, Alan, I think your point about these being an important part of town meeting is well taken. I would also say, you know, I have not, in my recollection, seen an article this in-depth presented as an article. I've seen them presented as non-binding resolutions. So one possibility is that we print this, that we not, I mean, I don't think we can put in a whole additional page for each non-binding resolution that might come before us in the town report, but it's possible that what we could do is that we could have a listing of those, and then these could be inserted, you know, Jane, if you provided these, they could be inserted as a as an adjunct to. I'm not sure, and again, we'd need clarification from the Secretary of State, because we also have to be cautious about trying to bias anything. So I don't know how that would work, but happy to work with you, Jane, as much as possible to try and figure out how to get this in front of people.
So just because communication's been very difficult, for instance, I didn't know I was supposed to be at the last meeting, even though I requested to be there. So who will get back to me by when with the next step?
So I would have Jonathan reach out to you.
And when is he's back in the office beginning of next week, correct?
That's correct. And January 8th, we'll have more information. He is the town clerk. He takes care of all the elections. And Jonathan and I are working hand in hand to make sure this is seamless. However, town meeting may happen next year. So somebody will get back to you, Jane.
And if you haven't heard back in what you think is a timely fashion, then Jonathan is the one to track down. And he has regular office hours when he's not on vacation. But he also, as you may or may not know, is a ski instructor, and so this is an important time for. I don't know how the skiing's been, but this is an important time of year for him in that role. So he took vacation.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
The question about how much information can be included with an article, 17 VSA section 2666. Neither the warning, the notice, the official voter information cards, nor the ballot itself shall include any opinion or comment by any town body or officer or other person on any matter to be voted on. In other words, the article can only say this is the import of the article. There can be no justification of the article.
Okay, so yes, that I think that sort of fits what I was thinking about it. So the statements related to it of, you know, essentially, and I don't know what your source, Jane, for this was, but essentially the opinion side of it, which may well be statement of fact, but it's still a fact that's been chosen to include it, I'm assuming can't be included in the article itself. So we'd have to figure out how to word it properly also. But
Mr. Chairman, that's because while there are proponents of Medicare for All, I happen to be one of them, there are also opponents of Medicare for All. So that is why it would be prohibited.
Right. No, so the question would be, and I'm guessing there are others that have done this before. The question would be how an article would be stated so that it meets that legal requirement not to have bias. So
indeed.
Okay, so
Josh, excuse me, you have a couple comments in the chat.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so Eileen is saying, I think the select board needs to be careful with playing favorites with what would normally be petitioned articles. You would either need to approve all or none to avoid favoritism. That's what I was implying. I mean, I don't want to set a precedent by saying we'll include it, because if we get all sorts, but you're right, Eileen. I think but it is also at the discretion of the board to either accept an article or not. And I don't know what the legal requirements surrounding that are, because I don't remember. I have reviewed them in the past. But, you know, if somebody were to show up with a resolution stating that all the residents of Putney must wear, you know, Mickey Mouse ears from July 1st until, you know, October 30th, I'm not going to agree to put that on as an article. But because I don't think it would be rational. But something like this, I've expressed this only as my personal opinion, but that I think this is important and should be at least had a discussion about. So, but I agree with you. We shouldn't pick favorites. It's more, from my perspective, it's more sort of judging rational or irrational when it comes to this kind of thing. So, and we've gone both ways.
To clarify what I meant was that in the absence of being able to collect signatures, you would have no way of knowing how many signatures you would actually get on any article, and whether it's irrational or irrational. If you get enough signatures, you have to put it on the warrant.
That's correct. But right, so all I'm saying is that, but we have the option to make that choice. We have the option to accept an article without requiring it to be petitioned. So that's again where I'm saying my vote would be to accept this without requiring a petition. If somebody were to come and say we need to wear Mickey Mouse ears, I'm not going to vote to put that on without a petition. I'm going to say if you want that on town meeting, that's up to you, but you're going to have to go and get the signatures. So that's where I can see how that might come across as favoritism. I guess for me, I'm expressing a personal opinion about how I would choose to look at it. So, but yes, we would obviously follow statute and how it's governed for whatever we needed to do. So, okay, Gino, I'm guessing that a significant amount of the discussion we just had is going to apply for you also. I don't think, I have not seen a proposed resolution. I have seen that you would like to be added to the agenda with an article about the town's response to climate crisis.
Okay.
It was
Josh,
sent at 5:14 today.
there was something sent earlier though. I did email to the select board, and Karen proposed a draft wording of the resolution that I would like to insert in the warning. That was mailed yesterday. So maybe you missed that, Josh, but did anyone else get that? It was.
I did not.
Yeah, I got it.
Alan,
I got it.
Yeah. All right.
I
Well,
have it too.
good. I'll re-email, or maybe Karen will share. But what I sent tonight was just sort of sort of Exhibit A, just reference about that sort of resolution as it was done in Burlington. Now, I'll just I'll preface my article by saying I and the people who have been advising me on this recently really believe that this probably needs to be a binding resolution. And that's actually not what I initially said to Karen when she asked me, but the way it's been done in a couple dozen other towns in Vermont, and certainly thousands of towns, tens of thousands of municipalities worldwide, it's just, it has to have some teeth in it. Okay, so I'm here to place an article in the warning that asks voters to approve a declaration of a climate emergency by our town, in which the town commits to pursue two basic goals. And those are A, reaching net zero emissions in municipal activity by 2031, and actively encouraging our residents to do so as well. And B, actively prepare for and assist our residents in so doing. I'll say that again. B, actively prepare for local extreme climate impacts and assist our residents in so doing. So that's that's it in a nutshell. That's not the wording I sent in that email, and that even now I think that's evolved, but this puts it in a nutshell. The way I've worded it, I think town commits to pursue. I don't see how that could be a non-binding resolution. So I think it would have to be warned as such, and then we are expecting to have to collect signatures in this short period of time in some COVID-safe manner. So
yeah, what I talked to Karen out about that, and I don't know. This would be a question for John as our town clerk. It may be possible, Gino, again, since it's such an oddball year, to collect those signatures electronically. And I have no idea whether that's possible or not, but I would think, we're doing things that we wouldn't have done before in all sorts of venues. But why would we ask people to go out and get signatures,
that would
standing
be
up
lovely.
and talking to people?
Certainly would be lovely. And I see that we are doing things by the seat of our pants. And, hopefully, as Karen suggested on January 8th, the Secretary of State will make his, declaration of how towns are to proceed. It would be wonderful, in my opinion, if we could have a real town meeting with discussion held outdoors in May. But, and again,
yeah, we've talked about all sorts of different possibilities, but I've been having those discussions with various people. But the part of the problem is that there are a certain number of things that really sort of business has to be conducted in order to keep things on a time frame. I mean, for example, our grand list has to be lodged in April. So if we haven't approved a budget before the grand list is lodged, that throws all sorts of things off as far as taxes. There's a sequence of events that has to occur. I think what it invites is opportunities to try and explore more open conversation in different venues than just town meeting, but for the purpose of town conversation. And so how to actually make that happen is a different question. But so I guess I would tell you the same thing I told Jane, is that I would encourage you to be in touch with John, but that we will try and get the information as soon as I will look at what you sent. I'm not sure how I missed it, but and Karen, if there's something I need that's updated, if you could send it. But I think maybe what we would want to do is send both of these resolutions, Karen, to the VLCT and have them give us an opinion of where they would appropriately land in a town meeting venue, and then go from there. Because I don't know how to make that choice. So
Okay.
Josh, just so you know, Karen posted this in the chat. The actual thing that you missed is in the chat now.
Okay, sounds good. Good, thank you.
So I don't need to drag this on much longer. Jane had asked a couple questions, and so that eliminates most of mine. But what I want to know is if the meeting is postponed, let's say a month or two, is it likely, in your opinions, that the deadline for these deadlines for the warning could be also postponed?
That's the piece from the Secretary of State that we don't know. So I mean that deadline of January 14th is based on it being 47 days in advance of town meeting, which is the current statutory requirement. Until they tell us otherwise, we got to assume that that's what it is. But again, that question of electronic signatures, I mean, I'm guessing with a couple good mailing lists, you could get 91 electronic signatures pretty darn quickly on something like this. So, so we'll find out about that as well.
Okay, so what just to wrap it up, that what I plan to do then, what my small group plans is just to cover ourselves, we're going to write up a petition and send the wording to Karen's office. So she and Jonathan, if he's back, I don't know, it's back on Monday, can review it and let us know if it meets the bill, fits the bill. And then we're going to plan on starting to collect signatures because we only do have, as I understand, until the 14th, if that will be required of us. So, all right. Having said that, I think Alan's raising his hand, but I think I've said everything I need to. I'll add that the wording in what Karen just posted now in the chat, that isn't my final draft. That was the draft as of yesterday.
Yeah.
I'll give a final draft when I bring it up to the office for review. It won't change much, but there's a couple things that I've been told have to change. That's all. Thank you all.
Good. Gino, why don't you stick around till Alan? I don't know whether Alan's question is for you.
Yes, but I just want to say that later on the agenda, there's going to be probably appointing a new energy commission for the town of Putney. And it's possible that the Energy Commission should at least have a discussion about this issue at some point. So I would encourage you to discuss this with the Energy Committee as well.
Thank you, Alan. Somebody told me that I'm rumored to have been nominated to be on that committee too. I don't know, but yeah, I will hang around and we'll be in touch for sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Gino.
Okay. Thanks, Gino.
Excuse me, can I be heard?
Right.
This is Ann
yes,
Carey.
Hi, Ann. Go ahead.
I just quickly want to say I very much support Gino's petition. We discussed this briefly in the Conservation Commission the other day, and the way he's gotten it really boiled down to two major points. On the second point, the Conservation Commission did recommend that the Putney Hazard Mitigation Plan, as it goes forward, should include climate change as a hazard the town should strive to mitigate, and we did suggest some ways to do that at a local level.
Good.
So that's all I wanted to say.
The other thing that to keep in mind, and Karen, this would be a good time to remind, we have a planning commission meeting coming up in January. You know, this will obviously fall under the purview of the planning commission as well. So, you know, they all tie together.
They do.
Just say that again, Karen. I think I cut you off. When that's January 7th, is that right?
January 5th at 7 p.m. It's virtual. So the agenda is up for the Planning Commission already on the website, and I will warn the Select Board for that evening as well. And I do encourage the board to be there because you will have to approve the sites as well.
I'm not looking at the calendar. What day is January 5th?
It's a Tuesday evening.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. So, Gino, thank you. So our next item is review bids for 1988 Ford fire truck and award.
So in your packets, you have two bids for the 1988 Ford truck that is sitting down at the garage. It's been sitting down there for a while. It's being sold as is.
I was confused, Karen, because one says it's for the fire response truck, but I thought it was a highway truck.
No, it's an old fire truck. It's like a water
Okay.
truck.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
So,
So one bid is $1,000 and the second bid is $1,025.58. So I tried to research to see if I could find a Kelly Blue Book value on this. I should have asked you to do it, David. But
I can cut this really short and tell you to take the higher bid, and we'd be lucky to get it. Okay.
all right. So, my recommendation is to award to the highest bidder.
Yeah. Yep.
So I need a
Do we
motion.
need to have a motion for this?
Yes.
I'd like to. Oh, Josh, can you just say it?
So I would entertain a motion to accept the bid from Steve Mears for $1,025.58 for the purchase of our 1988. I thought it was an F-350, but it looks like it's more than that anyway. For our 1988 fire truck.
Can I just say so moved?
Yes.
So moved.
And I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the sale of the 1988 Ford fire truck to Steve Mears for the amount of $10,000.
That would be good. I like that.
$1,025.58. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Congratulations, Steve.
Thank you.
Aye. Thank you. Okay. So next, Energy Committee appointments. So
In your packets, you should have 4 candidates that have expressed interest in the Energy Committee. And my recommendation is to go ahead and appoint all 4 as a slate. So you have Eileen Shute, Lionel Shute, Alan Blood, and Trevor Quest. And there is one existing member, Morgan Casella, who's still on that committee.
And I was going to suggest if Gino had left, we could just go ahead and appoint him, but he's still on, so we probably can't really do that.
I think Gino would make a good member, as he has good ideas.
If you're interested, Gino, we just need a very brief email or something to Karen asking. And otherwise, of course, as you know, you're welcome to attend meetings. So,
yes.
But I would accept a motion to approve appointment of Eileen Chute, Lionel Chute, Alan Blood, and Trevor Quest as our newest members of the Energy Committee.
I'm just going to say so moved. So moved.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the 4 interested members who I just named to the Energy Committee. Is there any further discussion? Alan, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if somebody will send us each email addresses for all those people so we can get ourselves organized, or unless there's another way this is going to happen.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll start the process for you, Alan.
Thank you.
And then you'll have to, like any other committee, you're going to have to appoint a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk to do minutes, okay? And this committee will run the same way, you have to abide by the open meeting law. And
well, meetings need to be warned.
Yes. Yeah.
So we'll be in touch with you about how to obey the law.
All right. Did we already vote to approve or not?
Not yet.
So all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Alan, Eileen, Trevor, and Lionel for your interest and willingness. All right. That moves it to you, Karen, Town Manager's report.
Okay. quickly. So we already discussed January 8th and the Secretary of the State. He'll give us more directive about town meeting. So I'll keep everybody posted. Jonathan and I will be working together. The schedule of deadlines for town meeting preparation is in your packet. So we are going to use those deadlines, like we're going to have town meeting on March 2nd. So whatever happens, we still need to meet these deadlines. January 13th, we will review the articles, because by that point we'll be pretty much through the budgets. And then if anything else comes through that needs to be warned for town meeting, we'll have to add it. But we do have until the end of January to approve the warning for town meeting. Let's see. Yeah, January 31st. The draft audit, I did send you the short version to the board for review. They will have a full copy for us for January 13th, and they will be at the meeting on January 13th to go over the audit with us. And that's about it for me right now.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we have, you said that we're going to review articles. Do we have any articles that you know of other than the two that we're waiting on that we just spoke about?
Yeah, we have the budget articles that I'm going to have to put in place. Whether or not you put on the warning, equipment fund, and how you want to allocate surplus. So we'll talk about that next week.
Okay.
And and we'll pretty much firm up what the articles are going to look like. I have some from last, I use a template year after year.
Yeah.
The officers, voting for officers will be on that warning as well. I don't we have a date, we have a time, but I don't really have a venue because.
And we often, I don't know whether we have any coming up this year, but we often have to vote on taxes for nonprofits for various different things.
We have one. The Putney Gun Club is up because they only had a 1-year exemption. And I would like to have them speak to the board on the 13th. Because I know they've been doing things over there on Sand Hill.
Okay.
And that was part of the condition.
Yeah.
So.
Sounds good. All right, let's see. So other business, annual appeals, Newbrook Fire Department and the Preservation Trust of Vermont and Valley Cares.
So those were in your packets as well. So every year we get requests for, contributions, through these annual appeals, but they were addressed to the select board. So I felt the need to at least have you review them.
I didn't get yours.
It might have been in a separate, I sent 2 different emails, David.
This is the one that it's in the one that had the not the one with the new agenda, the other one.
Right.
The packet.
Yeah. With
at the very end.
The long-term debt and the capital plan and all that stuff.
This doesn't ring a bell for me, so I'm guessing it's something that in the past the town manager has presumably chosen not to bring to my attention anyway. So I don't think we typically do this, but I may be wrong.
Yeah. No, and I haven't had the board do this before. So, you haven't sent money out of town.
Right.
For organizations that, But
Well, I mean, it's a little bit tricky because, for example, the Preservation Trust has been tremendously supportive of the town through various grants for everything from the general store rebuilding project to Next Stage Arts to.
Can I just interrupt because it wasn't in one of those packets, David. It was in a different a PDF called the Annual Appeals.
Okay. Thank you.
But I don't think we're in the habit of sending money, as Karen said, out of town. So we might want to.
maybe in the future, but.
Yeah, exactly. We might want to consider if those belong in the social service budget, or we just say, we're really grateful for your work and we're sorry, but we can't support you at this time.
And maybe we just acknowledge that, we received their appeal request and at this time it's not feasible financially for us to, because there are other like organizations like Putney Mutual Aid, I mean.
We heard it in just Putney Community Center and Putney Cares, and their needs are up. They're up, and they're in our town. So that's where we should start, at least.
Well, and I look at the fire department, where, and I know Newbrook is a totally volunteer. Like they don't have support from Newfane or any surrounding town that they serve. So, but I get it. But right now it's a little difficult.
Yep. All right. So unless we have any other business, and I just thought of something a moment ago that I was thinking, but now it's quickly passed.
Come back.
Then we do need an executive session.
Yes. Yes, we do. So we are going to discuss the community award and town report dedication.
Okay, so I'm not sure how that falls under executive session.
I didn't really have a executive session per se title to put it under.
Yeah. But seems logical that it would be that we could talk about these in executive session.
Right.
At the discretion of the select board. It's premature
knowledge, maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
What did you say? What? No.
What?
Premature knowledge.
Premature knowledge.
Yeah.
Alan, what were you saying, Alan? Thanks, Alan.
I'm going to leave, and then you don't have to be secret from me because I'll be
back. Thank you.
Thank you,
Alan. Have a good night.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So I would entertain a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing community award and town report dedication that falls under statute as premature knowledge.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Okay.
So we have exited executive session at 8:42, to be specific, and we had a creative and lucrative conversation about our topic, and we look forward to our next meeting, which is going to be a special meeting next Wednesday at 5 o'clock. I think we
5 o'clock, yes.
Okay. So that's Wednesday, January 6th at 5. And
can we be specific that it's just for budget?
It's really just for budget. I mean, unless anything else comes up. Well, and then executive session, because we do have executive session. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.